And while I had been the thorn in the side of our Republican establishment and our Republican governors for a couple of cycles, when I'm at the head of the ticket, I can't run against the Republican Party, and I, in fact, had to carry some of the baggage that had been packed over that 16-year period. Now, I would just suggest to you that now is only the time to look backwards in order to help you move forward on a more sensible and correct path. And I think that one of the lessons that was learned is that if we can lose Ohio in as convincing, or by as convincing of a margin that we lost it by, that the issue becomes for 2008, can the center-right coalition and the GOP win that state back? Because if they don't, the White House will more than likely go to the Democrats. The reason for that, from a historical standpoint, there has never been a Republican president to win or keep the White House without carrying Ohio. Fact is that Ohio in 2004 was the pivotal state. I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but let me suggest this to you. If it had not been for a constitutional amendment protecting marriage as a union between one man and one woman, George Bush would not have re-won the White House. That ballot initiative, that constitutional amendment, received 500,000 more votes than the president. The president won by 118,000 votes, a turn of 60,000 votes, and we will be suffering President Kidd. Now, the reality is that if we don't attend to our base, because between 2004 and 2006, we had a substantial number of Republicans stay home. We had a split within the evangelical voting bloc that was unlike the split from any time since '96. Ted Strickland, who is the sitting governor and who won the election fair and square, ran ads that said that he was an ordained minister. But when he was pressed, he said he didn't have a church and he didn't go to church. But that was never put in his ad. But the fact is that in exit poll after exit poll, in personal conversation after personal conversation that was very transparent and direct, people said, I voted for Strickland because I thought he was a man of thought and that he shared our values. I would just suggest to you that that's the overriding lesson. There is never a national election. There are 50 state elections with a national consequence. We have to begin to look at what's happening between now and the next election to understand what the electoral map is going to look like. The fact is that we have 3, I think, gubernatorial elections in 2007, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Louisiana. How those turn out will at least give somebody a psychological edge or ray of hope. There are going to be ballot issues across the country on marriage and property rights and a host of other things that will, re-ready our conservative base. Hopefully, the Republicans that remained in office, and let me tell you, in Ohio, the impact and the hit would have been much more negative if we hadn't drawn the maps over the past couple of map drawing periods. And so the question is going to be whether or not they got the message, whether or not they heard what the voters were saying. And so I think it's going to be very important that any party that wants to be the majority party attends to those things that were articulated by the various constituencies across the country as being important to them at the local level. Let me use a couple of examples and wind up. My grandmother was a domestic worker, and she used to bring us, me and my brother, books given to her by families for whom she worked. And by age 9, I had become Southwestern Ohio's leading literary authority on the works of Lewis Carroll. And one of the things I remember is Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland. There are two characters that sort of stand out. But the one I'll just share with you, one was Red Queen, the other was the Mad Hatter. And I don't know if you all remember how the Mad Hatter was sitting at a long banquet table with a beautiful linen tablecloth, and he had made a mess in front of himself. And instead of cleaning up the mess that he had made, he just kept moving down the table to a clean spot to make another mess. But by nature, that's the way of government. We need to be able to start to focus government on those things that matter. People want quality education. They want parental empowerment. They want a wider basket of choice. And the party that starts to focus on that and breaks from the 1965 unionized model of providing education will make a difference. People want more of their income. Those parties and political leaders and organizations that attend to limiting the reach of government, reducing the size of government, cutting taxes, and empowering families will in fact be on the side of families, and families will be on their side in the upcoming elections. We must have political parties and leaders that are determined to break the Mad Hatter syndrome at various levels of government. The other one is, literary example is Mrs. Jellyby of the Bleak House, Charles Dickens' Bleak House. You remember Mrs. Jellyby, was more worried about the fan makers and the flower children than she was about her own home and her own children. And therefore, many politicians become so locked into the Mrs. Jellyby syndrome, worrying about things that they can impact, that they don't look at the things that they can impact in their backyards. And I would suggest to you that those political leaders and those political parties that attend to things in their backyard, things that matter to folks, will find that those people will break in their favor. The third thing is that we cannot act as if culture doesn't matter. And I would suggest this to you, that we've made a lot of fun of Admiral Stockstill, but we better start asking ourselves the same questions that he asked. Who am I? And what am I doing here? And what is my mission? And that is so very, very important that political leaders start to answer those questions. And I'll tell you that part of who I am is wrapped up in an understanding. Somebody was said that Nietzsche once said about Christians. He said, I might believe more in their Redeemer if they look more redeemed. Which suggests to me that as leaders and as ordinary citizens, we have a responsibility to live the things that we profess to believe. I'll say this. My grandmother was, Charmaine, the first unlicensed psychologist that I ever came in contact with. When she sent me off to college to Xavier, she said, son, you're going to go to Xavier. It's a fine school. It has big library. But there are going to be 3 books that you've mastered. 3 books that you've mastered coming from this family that will help you to master any challenge or any other book that you will ever read. She said in reverse order, there are these. First, it's your date book. Your date book tells how you spend your time and with whom you spend it. How you spend your time and with whom you spend it. She said the next is your checkbook. She said no matter how abundant or how meager your resources, it reflects your priorities. And she said the third book is the most important book. It is the good book. It is the book that will help you choose the path of conviction over the path of convenience. It is the compass for living a good life. It is the workbook for doing God's will. And I would suggest to you that those 3 books, when I look at it now and I see the people that I have associated with that are in this room and beyond this room, I know with whom I spend my time. And I know how we spend our time. And I look at how we use the organization's treasury, how we use our treasury, what our priorities are. And all you have to do is to look at the mission of the Family Research Council and look at how we are marshaling those resources, and you will see that we're spending them in a way and on priorities that matter and that are consistent with God's will. And then the good book. It's all the lessons that you need about politics or any other aspect of life. And so I will leave you by telling you this. Charlie Ponticelli and I were in Geneva, Switzerland, and I had the occasion to have dinner with the Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel. He said something to me that was moving and incisive. He said, Ken, the one thing that you know when you come through an experience like that, and all you have to hold on to is your faith, that the miracle of life isn't only in its beginning, but in the capacity to begin again. And I would suggest to you that no political defeat should be looked upon as a final destination for a party, for a person, or for a country. We have to understand that we have the capacity to be born again, to be renewed. And in being renewed, to renew our culture. I want to thank you for being here this evening. I look forward to being, light and salt, working with my brothers and sisters of the Family Research Council. We're going to be networking with all of you as I have throughout my career and all of them have throughout their careers. We can make a difference because we understand that our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, didn't tell us to be the salt and light of the sanctuary. To be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. We're going to be consistent with that charge, and we're going to make a difference. God bless you.
We do have still quite a bit of food left that we would like for you all to enjoy. But before we adjourn to visit amongst ourselves a little bit longer, does anybody have any questions for Ken? He has agreed to take a few questions.
These are your family members.
Sorry, but I do have a question. First of all, thank you very much for those words. It's very insightful, and I agree with 100% of what you said. In terms of what you'll be doing here, what will be the tools that you will use to accomplish the goals you set out for in the research council?
Yeah, all that I am has been influenced by my family experiences. I grew up the early part of my childhood in a public housing community, the Laurel Homes. I could get in trouble at this end. By the time I got home, my mother already had the news. And that's because I had an aunt in every window, every student of that public housing community. The young people today have the internet. We have the internet. Moving information just fast. So, that's the number one. Understand how we're going to move information is by a human connection. So the policy councils that are springing up, the outreach outposts that are springing up all across this country, affiliated both directly and indirectly with FRC, will be a way that we move using modern day technology with a modern day version of the internet. That's what it's about. It's about moving ideas and moving numbers and getting policies and laws that encourage and support the right things in our culture. I'm focusing on areas where I have years, decades of experience. Expanding school choice, taking a look at how not only the federal tax structure and policies, but state tax structures and policies impact families. From the standpoint of income, from the standpoint of savings, from the standpoint of breaking cycles of dependency. And so we're focusing in on that. And quite naturally, consistent with the legacy of FRC, I've already started to speak to groups across ethnic lines about the importance of marriage and strong families. And speaking out, on those things that are trying to, or against those things that are trying to silence our voice or undercut our movement. Yes,
Ken, would you tell us a little bit about the success of your book, the one that you wrote with Jerome Corsi, the analysis of the culture and things? How's that been received, and what?
Well, it's been received enthusiastically in very small circles. That's because I was campaigning and I wasn't able to get out there and help Jerry market the book. But the folks who actually read it, I actually compliment us on the value added to the discussion that is introduced, but it's the bedrock principles that are embedded in it in terms of breaking the dependency on government, looking at the role of culture in uplifting our society and those who find themselves on the bottom rungs of the economic ladder, helping folks to understand that government doesn't hold the solution for all our problems, and not being bashful about saying that some of our most vexing problems are caused by us making bad choices. And so, we're going to continue. We might spice it up a little bit and get another forward and put it back out there and play. And now that we have a broader stage and a platform that will get more of my attention, we'll just widen that circle of enthusiastic readers.
Well, Ken, now that you have an enthusiastic communications department to get out there. Widen that circle.